So where to begin? Um, I want to do two things because I was told that people will mostly be interested in Brahmavihara, the project we ran from 2000 to 2017. I am focusing on it, but I want to contextualize it into some of the larger questions of Buddhist activism. And I think part of the way I might want to do that is to talk about how I got from one place to another. Um, how the project got started was that I'd been in Cambodia for a while. Before I came to Cambodia, I had lost faith in traditional human rights work. And though I settled into a human rights organization, because human rights organizations, the good ones, are an excellent way to see how ideology looks from the bottom rather than from the top. So I did that, and after a few years of going back and forth and doing various things, things came together for me. Actually, it was a human rights organization in Hong Kong that asked me to look at how Buddhism could help the poor in Cambodia and medical care for the poor in Cambodia. And the human rights organization I'd been working with, Likado, did a whole lot of both of those things. It did medical care in the prisons. It helped people. It helped the destitute. In fact, a vast majority of its immensely important work was responding to immediate needs in a country which at that point was still pretty poor. I got to Cambodia through the Peace Walk, through the Dhammayatra. One of the founders of that is here today, Mary Dunbar. Mahagosananda was an embodiment of loving kindness. And in the refugee camps in Thailand, a group coalesced around him, partly Christian, partly Buddhist, partly other things, that called itself the Coalition for Peace and Reconciliation. And when the 92 peace agreements happened, then it was a question of people coming back into the country. And someone said, why don't we walk home? And that was the first peace walk. And those peace walks went on. Well, they were taken over in about 2003, 2004 by Van Sivon, who was a marvelous, marvelous woman, because Maha couldn't do it anymore. And then they went on till maybe 2011 or 12, or maybe even 15, they were still happening. But there was a thought there. I'm getting old and senile, sorry. Maha died in 2007. Okay, Helen, I'm not asking you to start the screen sharing yet, please. Okay, thank you. Because I think when we get to the pictures, they're going to be a very important thing to be discussing and not discussing something else. Anyway, so I went on the peace walk in 96, and we slept in walks that had not been cleaned since the Khmer Rouge. We walked on roads that still had the bomb craters that I protested in America in 1970. We got up at 3 a.m, we chanted, we hit the road. It was lined with people with pails of water and branches so they could be sprinkled, and incense and candles and their little naked babies. And, I looked around and I said, destitution, terrible health conditions, my kind of town. So I moved here. Well, I've been working in Thailand, and Thailand was, I've never seen a country so successful as Thailand in those days. The minimum wage supported people, the educational systems educated people, the transportation system, except for the traffic, was marvelous. It was just, what do they need me for? Anyway, so I came here and did human rights so I could get a look at the country, because you should never start a project anywhere unless you've been there long enough. I learned that in Palestine, that you take your work from what people themselves need or ask for, and you have to be there long enough to be able to find that out. Palestinians are very direct, so it's simple, but with Cambodians, they tend to be more reticent. So finding out how to be useful was a real task. So there I was. And at that point, AIDS, we had a very late starting AIDS epidemic. And at that point in 98, 99, we were destined to look like Africa. We had military rates of 41%, police rates in the 40%. The work rates among sex workers were in the 30%. And I have always suspected that that was because the sex workers died the fastest. Their antiretroviral medicines were not on the horizon. They were talking about hundreds of thousands of orphans by 2010. Now, the wonderful thing is that Cambodia turned that around. The government and the international organizations that it brought in and supported, by 2008, we were one of the world's success stories in AIDS, the same way we are now one of the world's success stories with COVID. So I was fortunate that when I decided to work with destitute, dying people who had no hope, that the situation was going to change. But I didn't know that, What actually happened, I was hanging out with the Maryknolls, and they are, as people may know, a Catholic organization that does not convert people and that wrote the book on grassroots work. And they had an AIDS home care program. And one day there was someone who was dying, and I just happened to be silently chanting with him. And the next day his mother said to me, that really mattered to him. He believes he has AIDS because of his karma, and we don't have money for the monks. So he's terrified his next life is going to be worse. And I thought, well, that's something I'm actually qualified to address. So that was how we started. We started because I knew that the compassion of Buddha is not dependent on social structure, that it is there for every kind of suffering. This makes it a little different from the Christian option for the poor, because it's there for the rich also, that the liberation from suffering, the achievement of inner peace is there wherever there's a need for it. So that was what, in my megalomania and insanity, I decided to do. I thought, well, Maha brought the compassion of the Buddha back to the Cambodian people in the Dhammayatra, and why don't I let people know that the compassion of the Buddha is already there for them, that they are not outside of it because they're filthy and they're destitute and they have this horrible disease, and so that's what we did. We just went into the AIDS hospital and started hanging out. Okay, now could we see some pictures?
Sure.
We did a lot of other things, but at the core of the work was that. So that's what I'm going to take the time to show you. That's me with somebody who was dying. And she was very, very, very beautiful. She was just wonderfully beautiful. Okay, next one. Okay, we did a ton of Reiki. You're going to see some Reiki in the pictures, but she was 3 days away from dying, and she loved her Reiki, and that was after her treatment, and it was so beautiful to have her really okay in the middle of everything. Okay, next one. We knew her for 18 years. She was one of the first patients we met. She was $25 so her child would have something when she died. I have her videos. Could people get rid of their videos? Do you mind? And see if that stabilizes it. Anyway, she lived till 2018, and her kid is still around today, grown up. This was when she was living at a what down in south of this. Next, Helen. Yeah, we had one of the, after my translator, the first person we got was a Khmer woman who used to yell at me and tell me I was doing everything wrong in the hospital. So we hired her, and she wanted to be a nun. So we got her training as a nun, and she worked with us until the end of 2010. And we're going to show more pictures from what she's doing right now. But in the mortuary from the hospital where we worked, we put a Buddha, and every 2 weeks on major precept days, we'd go in, we'd scrub the place. If there was a patient who had died, we chanted for the patient. And then we did regular precept day chanting and meditation in the space. So what she's doing, we're circling the room, and she's sprinkling with actually Tibetan, those little pills that Tibetans make that are filled with prayers and herbs. So we had some of those from a Tibetan teacher, and she's sprinkling with that. Okay, next one. This woman had died the night before. This is her mother, and she's the one who's sprinkling in this. Here's the Buddha, and here we are circumambulating the room, chanting the precepts. We already chanted separately for her, and we left her face uncovered until the end of the period. In 2010, the hospital privatized the mortuary, so we moved the chanting home, and we no longer got to work with the patients in this way. Okay, next. That's the ashes of an 8-year-old boy that we knew very, very, very well. And they've just been ritually, the string has been put on ritually to bind the spirit inside. And Lokie is receiving it from the monk who did that. Okay, next. This is Ramo, who was my translator, and wonderful heart. Next, you'll see it. He's doing Reiki with this patient, and what I love about this picture is the tenderness and the complete devotion and the love that's in everything that he does. Next. This is Piap, who became our director. He is the most practical of all of us, still is. And also, next picture, you'll see. Yeah, look at the trust in the face of the man who's speaking with Piap, and the openness in Piap. I had a staff of really beautiful people. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much tenderness. Next, that's Hang. Hang. Hang could make anybody smile. We used to call her like the embodiment of mudita, because wherever she went, she could lift people's spirits in an extraordinary way. Next. Yeah. Both the mother and the father have AIDS, and this is before antiretrovirals. And, you know, when they're with her, it's possible for real joy to emerge. Yeah. Okay, next. That's Sun. What she's doing is Reiki symbols. But Sun, like Rameau, was a genius with Reiki. I don't know how much people know about Reiki, but it's a way of channeling chi and using the palm of your hands to transfer that chi to people. And, you know, it all seemed very strange to me, so I started doing it, and I saw how people responded to it. And the patients loved it, so we did it. And after a few years, I became a Reiki master, and then I could teach everybody. And so my staff wound up with a lot of Reiki. They also learned healing touch and a lot of energy work, as well as counseling and the other things they did. Okay, next. Yep, that's her with him again. And you can feel the warmth of her concentration. Okay, next. Sokni. Sokni was not the brightest bulb in the chandelier, but she was the most determined. You know, she would do wholeheartedly what she knew how to do without reservation. I used to think it was about right effort with her, but it wasn't. It was about aditan. It was about determination. And there was never a point at which she did not give 100%. Next. Again, you know, working with the patient, working with energy, providing that that energy would spread. Next. Prung. Prung had so he could feed his children, and he never got fully well. He was.
Beth,
Oh, yeah.
Beth, you just dropped out at the start of telling us about Prun.
Oh, okay, Prung.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, that he. Should I get rid of my picture? Would that help?
No. We need to see you.
Okay, yeah, okay. He had 6 kids. When he first got his antiretrovirals, he didn't take all of them. He sold them so that he could feed his kids. And he never got fully well. But again, he was somebody with this deep humility and this deep integrity who would just give his whole heart to people without judgment, he was just amazing. He died in 2014, and we really, really, really missed him. Okay, next. Okay, there he is working with one of the patients. Okay, next. That's Nyang. When we got Nyang, I got him because my staff wanted him, right? And I didn't see what the thing was about him. And he had 5 wives, and one of my staff was very, very critical of that. But something happened. Every year, one person was in charge you know, we'd start the day by meditating together, by lighting incense and candles and meditating, and then we'd have our meeting, and then we'd see patients. And the year that Nyang was in charge of that, something happened, and by mid-year, to watch him bow was absolutely revelatory. There was so much purity, so much letting go of the self, so much integrity in it, that it was like wonderful to see. Next picture.
Beth,
I love that picture because it's,
yeah, they're all wonderful, wonderful characters. Look, we're getting a bit of rustling in the sound, and someone has suggested it's because your mic is on.
I don't know. I don't have a mic except in
I didn't think so. Yeah.
Oh, I know what it is. It might be the fan.
Oh, okay.
Let me move it over. Is that better?
Yeah, that does sound better.
Okay,
It must have been rustling the papers. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
You know, okay. Anyway, so next picture. Okay. Until, you know, as long as there has been, well, I want you to see not only Nyang, but the patient, because this was taken late in the AIDS epidemic. And we still saw patients who looked like this, and we still had patients who died. And being present with them was our job, you know. Okay, next. Nung. Nung had been to first grade before the Khmer Rouge took over, and that's all the education she ever had. But she was an incredible housekeeper. And this patient, Chenda, was paralyzed. She's still alive. A friend of mine sends her money every month so that her family can eat. And Chenda is really interesting because Chenda remembers former lives. And you can do what you want with that. But Nung would go in there and she would clean the space and she would wash Chenda's hair. And it just was so lovely because everything was so fine when she was done. There's one more picture there. Yeah. It's actually, this is before, you know, as you can see from the stuff in the back, before the major cleaning, but it's a nice picture of Chenda's smile. Okay, next. Okay, now I'm done with my staff. My Trelek, this woman, first of all, we knew her daughter who died in 2001 or 2002. Then a few years later, her husband died. Her 12-year-old son was on drugs and at one point had to be changed in the house to get him off of them. He wound up in an organization that was really helping him grow. And then her husband died. And this is before she got really, really, really ill. Next picture. When she did get ill, she wanted to be a nun. And in Cambodia, getting to be a nun is easy because there's not a lot of respect, so you can do it. So we ordained her. And this is an ordination picture from her. And the next picture, you know, that's at her funeral. And she died very, very, very much at peace. Okay, next picture. This is one of our photographer's favorite pictures. It's stunning. That woman is still alive. people came back from being in that condition to having, real lives, raising families, being able to work. It was incredible. We were so lucky, and the government and the organizations were so good, because it was the Indian pharmaceuticals that made antiretrovirals available for $1 a day in Africa and Cambodia that made it possible for the destitute in Cambodia to live. Okay, next. Sokda was one of our, we knew her for 15 years through many, many, many crises. Two of her sons are doing really well. We don't know what happened to the third one, who was the oldest. She died in about 2017, no, 2014. Next. These are what this is just a gallery of patients' pictures. Some of this is an old man who lived in the hospital at Chechimnia forever, for years and years and years and years. Next. Taheng was again one of the people we were closest to. Nung would go in and clean his house, and I would think that Taheng thought he had his wife back. He was, he had an incredible, most people had traumatic childhoods. I mean, these are all Khmer Rouge survivors. But he had many, many problems and an extraordinarily beautiful heart. And we were very, very sorry after many years to lose him. Okay, I think that's it. Is that it? That's the slideshow?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the patients and us with the patients, which was the core of the work. And I've talked too long, but I'll try and not talk so much now. We did a lot of things. We paid transportation because the medicine was free and people didn't have the money to get the medicine. So we did that for when they moved 2,000 families, 22 kilos outside the city on a place with no roads. We were out there every week, and we provided transportation for 90 of those families to get their medicines. We built a few houses out there. We went to the prisons to the two main men's and women's prisons outside Phnom Penh. In the men's prison, we paid for supplementary food and a little bit of money for about 100 people, most of them AIDS patients, but also anybody over 70, anybody who had no, like there was a Bangladeshi guy who didn't speak any Khmer who was there. Any kind of odd cases like that, people with serious debilitating illnesses. In the women's prison, we did all that. Plus, we had supplementary food and vitamin pills for pregnant women and children who were with their mothers in the prison. The prison did not provide extra food for the children and barely provided food for the prisoners themselves. After we couldn't do that anymore when we closed, Buddhist Global Relief continued to pay for the mothers and children in the prisons and made sure that they had enough to eat. What else did we do? Transportation, supplementary food on holidays, anything that came up. Yeah, so we were very, very lucky, and then I'll open, okay? And we were lucky in that we were working in a situation where things could get better and did get better. And by the time we closed at the end of 2016, there were over 70,000 people on antiretrovirals. And Cambodia was looking at trying to get to zero case, net zero. So we were lucky. I wasn't lucky in Palestine. Even though some of the things we did worked, we were in a totally worsening situation, which has only continued to go in that direction. But we were very lucky. Yeah. Okay, Helen. Yeah.
Beth, I just want to say thank you. The photos were beautiful and very, as I said, very poignant. And we'd like to open it up to anyone who'd like to ask a question.
Okay, and I'd like to go for just a little bit longer before we open it up to questions.
Okay, but can I say if people would like to ask a question, just let us know on the chat room. Just put your name in the chat room and we'll get to you.
Okay, then Helen, you should read the questions to me, okay?
All right.
So I don't spend my time reading the chat.
I'll do that. Yeah.
All right. What I wanted to say is after we closed, when you're in the middle of a project which is fully engaging your energies, you really take a lot of things for granted. And after the project was closed and I had a lot of time to begin to sort of catch up with what was the world doing while I was doing this, in addition to, you know, it was around in 2017, my teacher authorized me as a teacher. So, you know, I was presumed to have developed fully enough to be able to let the Dhamma lead me. And that doesn't preclude studying more, of course. But I began to question the role of Buddhist activism. And I came up against the problem that Buddhism as Buddhist training does not, and especially meditation training, one does not guarantee that we will be without. All right, I mean, the problems are there. We see them. We see the Burmese monks calling for genocide against the Rohingya. We hear the Sri Lankan monks doing the same sort of thing. We see the corruption. We see, you know, all religions have these things, and Buddhism is no exception. But in addition, Buddhism itself does not have a concept of justice, especially when you're working within the meditative traditions, because justice is ideological. And there is no way within Buddhism to respond to ideology with ideology and be grounded in the ethics and be grounded in liberation. My own teacher this year on retreat did a very, very, very beautiful thing. And what I realized from it is because he was insisting on, first of all, he was insisting on the difference between what happens in the world and what happens in meditation. And then in the depths of meditation, really looking at what it means not to want anything to be different. And again, this is what it does in our heart in the depths of meditation. I've been working with the paradox of equanimity and compassion, that the more equanimity we develop, the stronger our compassion becomes. And this put it out into everything. Because the moment we don't want anything to be other than it is, then we're not limiting our understanding of what it is. And if we reach a point of not limiting our understanding of what it is, then when we go to respond, we can respond more deeply, more compassionately, more strongly, without being caught in the dynamics of ideology. So that while Buddhism does not have a direct response to structural violence, liberation allows a wholehearted response, which includes response to structural violence, and helps us develop the skills to do that skillfully. I mean, when I was, opposing the Vietnam War in the 60s, I got caught in those traps, as did many of us. My own anger was there, my own, and there was this polarization between, personal liberation and, anti-war work. And that doesn't have to be there. The teachings allow us to engage fully with the world, but they teach us how to do that without prejudice, without limitation. And that just seems to me tremendously important. So I wanted to bring that in, because when I talk about my own journey from, anti-war work through Palestine, through everything, through to here, what engages me now is the possibility of deeply authentic, compassionate response without limitation. And I think that people like Bhikkhu Bodhi give us good exemplars of that. My own teacher is not a bad exemplar himself, but okay, now Helen, we can throw it open to questions.
Okay, well, our first question is from Linda.
Okay.
Beth, you mentioned the spirit of mudita shining through in one of the lovely women who worked at the center.
Mm-hmm.
That smile. Yep. Would you like to expand on the importance of mudita when surrounded by suffering?
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yes. There's this whole thing that's been on. I don't know if other people have been seeing it. It's the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu and Joy. There's, I've gotten a million mailings from it and watched the film. And I actually took mass with Archbishop Tutu in 1989 in Jerusalem. We had to go outside because of a bomb scare, but we made it. Anyway, early on, we were going to the missionary sisters' hospice. And one of the young women said to me, "I really like it when you come. We laugh so much." And I didn't say anything. But I thought, but you're dying. Why are you laughing so much? And it's not laughing at suffering. It's laughter that emerges in the beauty that is there in spite of it. It is Barry Lopez, who is one of my favorite authors, has a thing where he talks a lot about climate and things. He has a very, very beautiful essay about going across the United States and seeing all of these beautiful places, untouched wilderness, gorgeous, all of these beautiful places, and how much your heart is filled with the beauty of it. And then having to hold simultaneously what's going on in the larger environmental picture. I think if we only hold the suffering, then it becomes very, very hard to be present in ways that are helpful. It's not a matter of not seeing the suffering. It's not a matter of not respecting the suffering. But mudita and compassion are like this. They're two sides of the same coin. You know, equanimity can hold the whole thing, but, you know, the energy goes into the world as loving kindness. When it meets joy, it becomes suffering, it becomes compassion. When it meets joy, it becomes mudita. And when it rests in equanimity. And it's important to be able to take it all in, not to let suffering cripple us. And that's a hard thing to do. But if when we go to suffering, we only take suffering, then we have nothing to give. And if we don't acknowledge the suffering at the depth, we have nothing to give. But if we acknowledge the suffering at the depth and the beauty at the depth, then we have riches. Then we have love. You know, then it becomes possible. You know. So it's a great question, and important for everyone. Yeah. Yes. How do we do that? How do we do that? Just every moment. How do we do that when we're reading the latest news? How do we do that? You know, how do we do that moment by moment by moment? How do we allow everything to be present? You know, so in meditation, in retreat, especially in our safe spaces, we work on how to begin to realize that in our hearts. And then we bring what we can from that into the world. And then as we bring it into the world, we see limitations we might not see when we're only working in our hearts. You know? And then we bring them back into our meditative process. So this firewall between the deep meditative process and the world is extremely important. But it also has a back and forth quality. It's not one to the exclusion of the other. You know, does that make any sense at all?
I don't know if Linda would like to unmute.
Yeah.
Linda, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Beth. Yeah, I think you what you just said is very true. It's accepting everything, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not being,
and that's not, yeah. Go ahead.
Not being defeated by things, but bringing one's heart into the situation that's currently present.
And accepting it doesn't means that we accept that harm is being done. Mm. You know, there are these ways in which there's some very, very important traps that all of us fall into sometimes. If we're accepting something, we may not want to see that harm is being done. If we're denying something, we may not want to see that there are positive aspects to it. You know, what Gil was saying on retreat, this is about what's called the wish list and the sign list. The sign list is where we no longer take apart for the whole. And the wish list is where we really become free of wanting things to be different. so that when we do respond to them, we're not responding to partiality and to our own preferences. We're responding to what's there. And, you know, this is many lifetimes of work. It's a good thing we got a lot of lifetimes.
So,
okay, thank you, Linda. Yeah.
Yeah, so just moving on, Beth, a
Yeah.
couple of thank yous from Marcello.
Oh,
Thank you for sharing a beautiful message.
oh,
And
thank
from
you.
Stav, thank you, Beth, for
Yeah.
your inspiring talk. It was a huge privilege meeting you in Cambodia, but she needs to go. She's left
She
out.
needs to go to work, yeah.
Yeah, and much gratitude. And then from
Yeah.
Jill Jamison, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Beth, with such
Oh, Jill.
with such inspiring work, and for your critique re Buddhist concept of justice.
Yeah.
Jill is wondering.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Jill is wondering if you are sharing your journey and learnings with others. There are huge needs in Burma and indeed in the West. And I'll just find Jill and unmute her.
Yes, there's Jill. I'm certainly not going to Burma.
Oops.
And what I have is a very small group of students, all of whom I love. And mostly I'm just living a very quiet old lady's life, you know, exacerbated, of course, by 2.5 years of COVID. But since I don't have the project anymore, you know, I'm not like in demand to talk about all this exciting stuff the way I was. And, you know, for years I was going every year, and that's how we never had institutional donors. We lived on Dana for all those years. And that meant that when we made mistakes, we could work on them. There wasn't some 28-year-old in Washington looking over our shoulders to you know, don't get me started about these people who can't find Cambodia on the map but know exactly what it needs. Sorry. Yeah, like let go of your prejudices, Goldring, sure. Anyway, but
you were writing. You were writing so much early on of your experiences, and it'd be wonderful to be able to, you know, share those more fully, the journey. I mean, there's so much to learn from that direct experience. Not many people have that, working in such deep suffering, and to see the transformation taking place, the people that you've trained, and that message of you know, the light within the dark, so to speak, that you know, people, it's not identifying just with the suffering, but you know, the importance of focusing on liberation.
Actually, my teacher does an extraordinary job of all that. You know, Gil Fronsdale's my teacher, and you know, he just does an amazing job of all that. And he's got an amazing group of people that he's training as teachers now, and he's got a huge Sangha, and he's on YouTube all over. He, you know, when COVID started, Gil just threw his heart into teaching. Just, you know, 5 days a week, 5 mornings a week, you know, 30-minute guided meditations followed by 15 minutes of short Dhamma talk, a new topic each week, except when he did the whole 4 foundations of mindfulness in, you know, 1 million weeks. But plus retreats, plus he's got a teacher training program now. And the thing about Gil, among other things, is that it's all Dana based. You don't have to be rich to study with Gil.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah. It is amazing.
And the work that, you know, not just that, but the work that you have done based on Dana to offer that support and to relieve suffering for so many. Not that it's based on money, but there's costs involved. So it's amazing that you drew that to you.
It's just, you know, for me, it's very easy because I didn't set out to spend 17 years in this project. I just started doing it because I didn't know what else to do. And then things worked from there. And because it was Donna, we didn't have to have log frames and set up and lie to donors. We could be completely honest about our failures. If you read, you know, I wrote project letters during that time. And if you read them, they're full of our failures, you know. And somehow miraculously, I'd go to the States and I'd go begging and I'd come back and we'd have another year of work. Yeah. Anyway, I saw Patty Curran is here. Patty.
Patty has given us a message saying thank you.
Yeah.
What a treat to see you after so many years. And be touched.
Yeah. Well, Patty, let me see you. Where are you?
I think she's gone.
Did you go?
I think she just dropped out. Anyway, she says, what a treat to be touched again by your lightness and wisdom and your joy. Blessing.
About her recently from Patty. When I got to Cambodia, the gang of people who had worked in the refugee camps and come into Cambodia were some of the most impressive people I've ever known in my whole life. And Patty was right there in the center of it. You know, just amazing.
What a shame she's
And I heard
gone.
about her recently. I can't think of where. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Patty, if you watch this, send me your email.
I guess you could find it in Partners Asia, Beth. But look, I just want to say to people who are on the webinar that for those who weren't on our webinar with Jill has done a lot of work in Myanmar and was.
Wait.
And I just
wait, Helen.
Yeah.
Are we confused about Gil's? Gil studied in Burma.
No. Jill.
Me.
Jill.
Oh, Jill. Yes, Jill.
Yeah.
Jill.
Because we had the webinar with Jill, and then we did a little bit of fundraising for her. Just wondered, Jill, I mean, Myanmar is obviously a mess, but how are you, faring these days with your work?
Oh, to me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I've just come back from the Thai-Burma border and meeting with many leaders and activists, many friends from Burma, activist friends who've escaped there. And it's both very inspiring to see the levels of resilience of like the civil disobedience movement, the non-violent activists, professionals, doing small things to support themselves and each other. But on the other hand, the depth of trauma is huge, the depth of suffering and trauma, and the need for really well-being workshops or trauma healing, but even to call it well-being, they're all asking for that and trying to see how to link people up. But it was also encouraging. I met a monk on the border who joined a training I did 10 years ago with Kachin Women's Peace Network. He was one of the leaders of the Saffron Revolution and became an ardent peace builder, used a lot of the materials I shared with him. And so now on the border, he's doing on Facebook Live, giving Dharma talks, not just of the traditional teachings, but practical ones of how to deal with pain, how to deal with the military, how to deal with fear, and this sort of thing. And there's an interfaith network that is really active and wanting to connect with INEB, International Network of Engaged Buddhists, or to have people come to the border and teach and to work together. So there were some encouraging things there, but just the determination, the way people putting their lives on the line. But in terms of, yes, that there were 25 monks had gone back inside and supporting their communities. So it was great to hear because that information is hard to get out.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill.
Jill, could you put your email in the chat?
Oh, I would love to. I missed putting my email last time when we shared a Zoom with Alan Sanake, and I'd love to be in touch.
Yeah, I can't remember who I saw a couple of weeks ago, but your name came up, and I thought, God, I miss her. And here you are.
How can I put a type message here? Right.
Well, actually, wait, here, just tell it to me.
Here it is. I've got it now.
Okay. So let me open the chat. Yeah. All right. Wait.
Right.
I don't see it. No.
No,
I
so
haven't sent it.
It's not there yet.
Oh, okay.
But while Jill, I've got Jill's email, so
Yeah.
I'll make sure you get it. Beth, while Jill is doing that, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So just while I watched those photos, I thought, how can Beth do this work every day? It must be so draining. And so
I had this.
I think the sort of soul destroying to be with now this is my question, to be with people who are dying. And I thought, well, she's kept going, so is it draining or is it inspiring?
My unofficial supervisor for the first 10 years I had the project was the head of the Mary Knoll AIDS Project, which was called Seedlings of Hope. And we were, they were the closest organization we worked with, and we worked with a lot of organizations. And so I'd go every week and I'd tell him my problems. And the first year he would say to me, you don't have to continue. If it's not life affirming for you, it's not life affirming for the patients. And I said, Jim, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not life affirming.
Yeah.
So that went on for about a year. And then in about the third year, fourth year, there was this sea change that happened. And the first time it happened at the absolute depths was one of the most beautiful moments in my life. We were in this horrible slum with a woman who was dying on a bed with, stuffed bedding that was just unbelievably filthy, and a floor filled with rats and walls you could punch through, and 2 rooms in the place, And I was doing Reiki with her, and I had her head on my lap. And all of a sudden, it wasn't me and her. It was the 2 of us being held in a compassion that was absolutely boundless. And it was one of the most beautiful moments in my life. And later, I learned to take that experience, not exactly for granted, but I knew that if I went into the room and I was present for it, that something would take over that was much larger and much more important. But it's a matter of resistance. It's a matter of ego. It's a matter of, letting go of all kinds of things. And then when you do, when you can't, it's transformed. So that the work with the patients was boundlessly nourishing. What got me down was, the administration and the, my staff got really good. My staff was amazing. And the first time I ever walked into a room, it was over a holiday and they were all away and I was substituting it. And the patient looked at me and he said, "Where's Sun?" I was so hurt. and so jealous. And then I thought, no, she's supposed to be better. Sonja's Khmer. She has this huge heart. She's got AIDS. She's almost died of tuberculosis twice. You know, what she has to bring here is like, I mean, she's supposed to be better. And in the end, as things developed, I mean, this wasn't true of everybody, and everybody didn't stay with us forever. Sometimes us and sometimes them made the decision. But for the people who did, all of them had ways in which they were just profoundly able. And, you know, with Sun and with Prung, we knew with Marino, you had AIDS and you got on your antiretrovirals and you started to recover. One of the things you could do was be a caregiver for other patients, you know, and that was a way to start supporting yourself and your family. And, you know, what we did for staff after a while was we just picked off the cream of it. You know, and Marino didn't mind because they had other people in the pipeline, right? But I remember when I got Prune, we'd been, you know, we needed someone. So I went to the person who was running Marino at the time, and I said, you know, we need someone. Can you suggest someone? She said, well, there's Prung, and we can't hire him because we don't have space for another full time. And I said, well, okay, I'll go talk to my staff. And I went back and they said, you can't get Prung. He works at the hospice. And I said, no. She said I could have him because they can't hire him for a regular job. And they said, oh, Prung's going to come. It helps, you know, when I was in Palestine, I almost died of asthma. Some of it was tear gas, and some of it was, you know, anger, and some of it was deep dishonesties of many kinds. And I knew there were things I needed to learn that I couldn't learn there. And when I left, I'd been working with the pre-Oslo Palestine negotiating teams. I was a specialist in keeping families together. And we did that. It was one of the very few things that improved for people. But I knew that there were things I needed to learn. And I had no idea how I was going to learn them, but I knew that I wasn't going to learn them there. So I went to Thailand and I, you know, had lots of culture shock. And then I came to Cambodia. And after about a year, the penny dropped that this is a society that really values kindness. It values kindness the way Americans value independence, or the way Palestinians value courage. You know, it's just a really core value. And I thought, God, I don't know how lucky I was to get to this place. Because learning kindness, you know, is so profoundly nourishing. And, you know, so burnout. A friend of mine used to say, if you're not burning out, you're not doing work. But it's important not to cling to burnout, not to cling to aversion to burnout, not to cling for, you know, because, you know, all this stuff piles on top of it, hopelessness and this and despair and, you know, and it's all proliferation. It's all papanja. Yeah. Okay. Helen's got her hands up because it's 3:15.
It is, but we've just quickly, one more question just quickly, and then if I could wrap up. So from Pravini, thank you so much for the amazing talk.
Okay, yeah.
I understand that you also became very close with the patients whom you looked after. How did you deal with the grief of their passing? Was it through the practice of letting go and not wanting anything different than what is? And I know that's quite a big question. And
no. Okay, I'm going to give that's a beautiful question. One, we did ceremonies. Ceremonies are so profoundly helpful when they're done from the heart. You know, we recited the dead, we kept them in our hearts. Secondly, you know, when Prung died, we all went into tailspin for months, you know. But you learn. I mean, tailspin is something to practice with. Burnout is something to practice with. It's all food. It's all food for practice. So, and then it's important to have space to rest. It's important to have beauty. In our one place that we had real space for gardening, and we had hundreds of flowering plants and big bamboo, and you know, we couldn't go there without feeling, you know, counterweight. And we had each other, and we had the chanting, and we had the meditation, and we had, you know, we had ceremonies. You know. Sadness is, you know, you don't have to be working with, you know, anything awful to have sadness. It's just, you know. So there is no formula. There's only the moment to moment, learning how to be present for your own suffering and to be non-judgmental about your own suffering. And even for me to learn to be non-judgmental about my own rage. Because being judgmental about it just adds another layer of rage. So slowly. I mean, it took about 4 years before I wouldn't just, you know, go home at night and crash until it was time to go see some more patients. But, and I had Jim for support, my Mary Knoll, you know, supervisor.
Beth, I think we're over time, and I don't want to upset your host. And
they need
I think I can say on behalf of all the participants, thank you so very much for all the work you've done. It is
thank you.
It is just incredible to hear someone who's done work like that, and it's just so valuable and you know, personally so inspiring.
Well, there's plenty to do.
So thank you again, and we really value your time.